The Questions Log, Week 27. She knows. This is 52 Pickup. Welcome once again to 52 Pickup, a podcast about the greatest comic you've never heard of. I am professional comic book expert Alex Jaffe. Joining me this week, celebrating the 1-year anniversary of their very good website, Gita Jackson.
It's me. It's 1-year anniversary. If you're listening to this podcast, I want to remind you that until November 29th in 2024, you can get one, if you are a new subscriber, you can get 1 month of Aftermath for only $1.
Only $1?
Only $1!
I don't know when this episode's going out. It might be too late. But,
it might be too late. But
even if it's not, it's still a good value at $7.
It is, honestly. Let's just take 1 minute, because we just recorded a bonus episode.
Yeah.
We have gotten, for our bonus episodes, which you get if at the reader tier, the lowest tier for subscriptions, we have interviewed every single writer except for Grant Morrison.
That's right.
And also multiple artists on this comic book.
Yeah.
I can't put a dollar amount on how much you want to hear Greg Rucka just talking mad shit, but for me, that would be more than $7, right?
You want to know what Greg thinks about Absolute Wonder Woman? We got it.
Yeah, Greg had a lot to say. Greg is so great. This is now a podcast about how much we like Greg Rucka. I genuinely loved, and then also talking to Mark Waid and Jeff Johns, it was hard to be professional in some senses. I'm like, I've read your shit for like my entire life.
And yeah, I mean, as great as we are, if you want to hear about people who actually know what they're talking about this book because they were there, it's all waiting for you in the subscriber feed.
And like I won't spoil how, but the most wonderful treat of those interviews is that every single writer we've talked to so far has a different story on how 52 started.
It's a real Rashomon situation, and I'm enjoying it very much.
Like, some of these are not compatible with each other either. It's really, really funny. But here again, in this issue, our first step into the second half of the series, we've got a really wonderful, it is firing on all cylinders, this issue, and really proves, I think, the concept behind 52. This is one of those example, like, flagship issues where you're like, okay, this is why these were the biggest writers at DC at this time.
Mm-hmm. We've been leading up to this for a while, kind of walking you up to the big drama in the second half. What happened behind the scenes is one of the mysteries that I went into this podcast trying to figure out was what makes a weekly series like 52 so good when every other attempt to make one has failed, regardless of the talent, regardless of the scope, regardless of the ambition. This is kind of the only one that's ever worked. And after talking to so many people who were there at the time, the answer seems to be unanimously Steve Wacker. I've tried to get into contact with Steve, but still haven't been able to reach him. Steve, go on 52 Pickup. But here's the scoop. Steve Wacker was able to corral this impossible cast of all-star writers and artists to put out a weekly comic book on time every week that made sense and people were engaged in. And Marvel saw what they were doing. And what happened was Marvel offered Steve Wacker more money to jump ship and go for them. They didn't have a project for him. They just wanted him to not be at DC. He was too powerful.
This was the shit that was going down a lot between Marvel and DC in this era. I remember like there was always a new announcement of a different writer or artist like signing an exclusive contract with Marvel for like a long period of time. Also, like over a year, sometimes like 5-year contracts. Like it was quite dramatic because I believe also at this time, please correct me if I'm wrong, both these companies were in debt also. Mm-hmm. Like this was in the era before the Marvel movie, when Marvel as a corporation was really like fighting for its right to exist. Yeah. Like ruthlessly trying to claw some mind share back in the dwindling comic book industry. Like this was a hugely different time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a Rashomon situation, much like 52's production itself, of what exactly the level of animosity there was between Marvel and DC at the time. If you've ever read Reed Tucker's Slugfest inside the epic 50-year battle between Marvel and DC, that's a very illuminating context on maybe these aren't just like everybody play nice organizations. There sometimes is some very, very bad blood there.
Yeah, for some of these people, it is personal. And if you look into way, way back in the history of comics, you get prolific stories of people just getting ripped the fuck off. The most famous one we talked about yesterday in our bonus episode that we recorded, we talked about Alan Moore's whole situation with DC. Like, that just soured his entire relationship with superhero comics entirely for the rest of his entire life. Like, if he wasn't already a communist then, he definitely became a communist after. One of those things.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if we've even talked about this, but there was a recent story where former DC publisher Dan DiDio came out and admitted, hey, you know why there haven't been any DC Marvel crossovers? That was me. Marvel wanted to do it. I was not having that.
Why is he so determined to become everyone's supervillain? Like, why are you Lex Luthor? Why are you doing this? He wanted to kill Nightwing. He wouldn't let us do crossovers.
I'm determined to one day be the only good bald man in comics. We'll get there.
You're getting the head start now while there's still hair still hanging on.
There's still hair. I still got a little bit of time.
Yeah, no, your hairline is looking pretty. I mean,
it's okay.
It's still there. It's there. It still makes sense, right?
Yeah.
There comes a point when a hairline stops speaking. Like, it's like a gerrymandered district, you know?
Thanks.
Yeah, but you are not reached that point yet at all.
All right.
So
I'll get there though. I'll get there.
Yeah. I think you could rock it. You would look
Thanks.
good. My whole thing about
I don't hate it.
No, I've dated a lot of men that have had hairline problems, and what I would always say to them is, like, you're really handsome. Just be confident enough to shave your head, because people, like, so few people will actually care about the fact that you've lost your hair if you are a confident enough person to just shave your head. My fear with shaving my head is always that I've got a weird shaped head. Yeah,
I think I do too.
I'm afraid that I might have a weirdly shaped head and you don't know until you shave your head.
Yeah.
But I think you would rock it. I think you would look good.
I've noticed sometimes that when I like lean back against a wall, my head gets like stuck in a specific angle because there's like a flat part. I'm like,
oh yeah,
uh-oh.
I got a flat part too here. And it's really, really comfortable for me.
Yeah, I know. It freaks me out.
Really comfortable.
I have a built-in headrest. I don't think that was intentional.
No, you've evolved. You're a superior form of man.
Yes. Sign me up for Charles Xavier's School for the Gifted. I have a divot in my skull.
This is why they call us God's chosen people.
Oh, God. Anyway,
comic books.
Comic books. This is the first issue where Steve Wacker is gone. He has been fully poached by Marvel. He has done everything he can to keep the ship going. And honestly, he did a pretty good job, because the 52 stays good for the next 26 issues. A lot of people tell you the best stuff happens in this back half. They're not necessarily wrong. I spoke on Instagram to this week's artist, Sean Mall. This was his last issue of 52. Do you want to talk talent?
Let's talk some talent, because you got some goss.
Let's talk talent. So I spoke to Sean Mall. He previously penciled the Death of Booster Gold issue, the Frank Grimes issue. This issue, if you've noticed, if you've been reading along with us, you'll see the names of like 8 different inkers on this. We got Rui Jose, Nelson DeCastro, Mariah Pettis, Rodney Ramos, Prentice Rollins. Michael Siglane joins the editorial team, relieving Stephen Wacker at this point. And I spoke to Sean to find out, like, what's the deal? Why does like every other page have another inker on this? So I spoke to him on Instagram, and here's what he told me. Sean Mole says, Wacker was quitting and going to Marvel. He signed off on receiving my penciled pages and told me to sit tight for the new editor to send me my next gig. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the new editor asking when I planned on getting the last half of the book done. I replied that I'd sent them in weeks previous and had the email from Wacker that he'd received them, and I'd been advised that my next script was supposed to be incoming. Then I got a phone call just to see if I was bullshitting. He then started contacting the Brazilian studio who was doing most of the inking. That's where Rui Jose et al. Comes from. And they said they were working on them. After calling the editor multiple times, it turned out that they didn't even have the pages. By this time, things were obviously not going well, so they reportedly sent shitty Xeroxes around town for a number of inkers to lightbox and ink pretty much overnight. Not cool. But I at least wish they had thought to ask me for my high-resolution scan so they could have at least printed some decent blue line pages. The pages turned up in a Brazilian FedEx facility, I think like a month or so later.
That's like so depressing.
This is the kind of shit that happens every week if you don't have a Steve Wacker on board.
Yeah. You know, I think we talk a lot about the difference between the manga industry and the American comics industry. And I think this is one of the big ones, right? Where the manga industry, it's not like they're not sending things around to assistants to color things or whatever, or, you know, to do cross-hatching and shading and other kinds of forms of line work. Backgrounds often go to assistants. But the likelihood of your shit getting lost in a FedEx facility in Brazil is incredibly low. Yeah. At the very least, it's much more likely that things are being shipped around via couriers to different apartments in Tokyo. Whereas there's just not as big of an apparatus for doing things weekly in America. The infrastructure is not built in. There are monthly and weekly comics. I know a really good comic I really like in Shonen Jump, Gakura Kugai. That's a monthly book. And you can often tell just based on the quality of the art, it's a lot more polished in a monthly book than in a weekly one. But it's also true that just like Shonen Jump has been running weekly comics for like 50 years or something, you know, longer than that probably. They do not have this infrastructural problem. They just don't. Yeah, it's really that kind of assembly line production that came from, say, when comics came up in the 1930s, 1940s, there weren't a lot of people on hand to do everything. It was a very nascent industry with a lot of people who just working there who couldn't get work in other fields. People were short-staffed because of there was a war on. There was literally a war. Yeah. So they just kind of had to ship things around and treat it like assembling a car. Yeah. And that's kind of where the industry has stuck ever since. And it kind of follows from the fact that like so many people are involved in the creation of every comic that no one is necessarily able to claim ownership of them but the publisher themselves, which is kind of how we got in this whole mess. Yeah, you know, you look at the background, like every single thing goes to how it was done initially, right? Yeah. Even the colors of the suits, those primary colors, they were printing on newsprint with like newspaper printing presses. So the primary colors are easier to print because you don't have to mix them with anything or run the machine back so that you can get another layer of color on there. It all goes back to CMYK. Yeah, it really, really does. And I just think, like, we talked in the bonus episode that we just recorded about One Operation Joker, which is a very good bonus episode you should definitely listen to. Oh, yes. We talked at length about, like, the cultural difference here and, like, how much the Japanese, like, mangaka do not want to come to the American comic books industry because it does not, while you have these iconic characters, because of the way the entire industry is structured, it's just less appealing. You don't get to own anything. Right. And also you make a lot less money. Yeah, the way the Western comic industry works now is that work for hire is kind of the middle step of your career. You start on these small indies until you get the attention of these big companies. You build up an audience and a following at those big companies, and then you leave to do your own indies again. And this time you've got your own creator-owned audience. Yeah. Like we see it all the time. James Tynion built up a huge studio based on his Batman perfect example, work. Especially because he's been so successful on Substack, running essentially his own comic book universe using Substack for comics. I mean, one of the writers on 52 has done exactly the same thing, right? Greg Rucka did that. Greg Rucka did that. Jeff Johns did that. Grant Morrison did that. Right? Morrison has like clearly a love-hate relationship with these two giant publishers where they love writing and playing around with these characters, but they hate how everything just snaps back the moment they leave. That is like the story of both the new X-Men series they wrote and also the Batman and Final Crisis series they wrote. Right. Well, what's interesting about 52 in particular is that week to week we do see these characters evolving. So at least in this window of time, we're getting that rare payoff to these years-long character arcs. And we begin that on day one, this issue, with Ralph Dibny. Dog. Like, okay, this day one page, if you are like me and are an intense identity crisis hater, this was like Christmas morning. I know.
I know.
This, so good.
This 100% feels like Mark Waid going, you want me to talk about Identity Crisis? Okay, let's talk about Identity Crisis.
Yeah, absolutely that. And also like just a little tiny taste of justice for Greg Rucka and the characters he created also. Just like, oh yes, we do remember the fact that we really correctly gave another life to this character. Like we're actually going to pick up the little seed that you planted from the end of Gotham Central. We're going to play with it. We're going to try to make sure that people remember that it is canon, that this did happen. So at the end of Gotham Central, Renee's partner dies.
Yeah.
And that was Jim Corrigan. Correct.
That's correct.
Correct. I'm making sure I remember correctly.
No, Renee's partner was Crispmus Allen.
Crispmus Allen, right.
Right.
Okay. So it's just, and then the person that becomes the name of this character, the spirit, the Spectre, the divine spirit of revenge, is imbued, like, has the face and the body and the, like, it is just this guy that was unjustly killed. Yeah. Like, it is, this is maybe one of the only places where it's acknowledged that this happened. And I was so upset after this comic that I didn't get to just read about my cool characters again because I really liked that development. But at least I have it right here. I have it in my hands. It's for me, unless I'm entirely 100% wrong.
Yeah, I think Crispmus Allen becomes the Spectre after this dude.
After this dude?
Yeah, what we are seeing here is a little window of time where the Spectre does not have a host, which is kind of the impetus of everything that happened in Day of Vengeance, one of the tie-ins to Infinite Crisis. Like,
Sorry, I hate comics sometimes.
Sorry.
No, it's true. It's just you said tie into Infinite Crisis and you saw the expression I was making. And it's just like, so many fucking things are always happening in comic books. Yeah. Well, I love to be right, but I also can admit when I'm wrong.
Yeah. Okay. No, you're right. You are right. Crispmus Allen becomes the Spectre in Gotham Central number 38.
I fucking knew it!
Yes. I'm wrong.
I can't believe I did it. I beat the champ.
You beat the champ. You did it.
I fucking did it.
You knocked me out. No, this is Crispus right here. Yeah.
This is Crispus.
Merry Crispus.
Because the Spectre does not show up a ton, because it's hard to actually write for the God's divine spirit of vengeance, like as a concept. You don't get to see him a lot. And I was always really upset because I loved Gotham Central and I thought this was a really cool development for that character. It's just like, as Rucka explained in our interview with him, you plant this seed and you have no idea if someone's going to actually run with it and take it. And Rucka in particular is not very happy that a lot of people have just ignored entirely the things that he has planted and the things that he has tried to give to other people to grow. But here is like, this is one of the coolest, like, for my money, one of the coolest appearances of the Spectre.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a real shame that we did not get as much of this as we should have gotten.
Let's talk a little bit about this scene, and then I'm going to talk about who the Spectre is. We're picking up with Ralph Dibny going on his magical mystery tour through the mystic realms of the DC universe. Ralph has been kind of letting the Helmet of Fate guide him around, and Ralph's like, enough bullshitting. I want to pick our next guy. Let's go see the Spectre. He's like, hey, Spectre, remember how you brought Green Arrow back to life in Kevin Smith's comic? Why don't you do that for my wife? And
you did that for Ollie?
Yeah.
Like, you can do it for me.
Exactly. And the thing about the Spectre is that when the Spectre did that, his host at the time was Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan had sacrificed his life in the final night, and for a few years he was the Spectre before Jeff Johns decided he should be Green Lantern again. And while Hal was the Spectre, he was bending the rules a little bit because he's like, I can bring back my best friend.
Because he's fucking Hal Jordan.
It'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now this new guy, Crispmus Allen, he's the Spectre, and he's like, well, there are rules here. He was always a rule follower. He was the one good cop. And now he's like, well, I specifically have authority over vengeance. So I'm going to give you a way to help. I'm going to give you a way to use my power. I can help you out, but I need to use you in an Old Testament style ironic punishment because that's the only way I'm authorized to exercise my powers. And that's a really weird thing to have power over specifically, that you could only do it to deliver ironic punishments. But I can explain this.
Please do.
Yeah, this is also where we get our title drop, The Past Best Hope, a play on Last Best Hope.
That's there's a lot of cool stuff that happens in this that will explain that title. But please explain the spirit of ironic punishments.
Okay. So I got to take you back to 1938.
Oh, exciting.
In 1938, a couple boys named Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created a scrappy little champion of the oppressed named Superman, whose whole deal was that he would go around and put the biblical fear of God into exploiters of the people and the public and our systems. He would put war profiteers into the front line of a war. Like, oh, you like war so much, huh? Well, look at this. He would trap people who exploited their mine workers in the mine. Like, look what you're making your workers do. And he would just do this he would take corrupt prison wardens and force them to live under the exact oppressive systems that they were enforcing. That's what Superman did every month until World War II happened. And they had to just make him this jingoistic symbol of America. Jerry Siegel was very frustrated by this. He did not like the direction Superman had to take. So he invested his whole ironic force of God punishment character into a new guy named the Spectre, who would be the instrument of God's vengeance, and his whole deal is going around and biblically punishing people who deserve it. And that's how we ended up with this guy. He's Superman Mark II.
Yeah, that's very Hashem coded.
Yes, exactly.
He's that's very much a Jewish creation. That's very much a Jewish idea of what God likes to get around doing. Stand-up comedy and comic books, uniquely Jewish art forms. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Mark Waid, when he was on our bonus episode, I think he alluded to the fact that he got in a lot of trouble once for saying that the Spectre represented the very specific Jewish version of God. And no, I own it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. The New Testament God, the Christian God, I do not, it's all about Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is not about ironic punishments. He is about kindness to your neighbor. Hashem will send you to hell if you eat pork. That's happening. Yeah. You know?
There's a God who made the book of Job happen, and it's not the new one.
Nope, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He is not saying sacrifice your son. Just kidding.
Yeah.
That's new. I like the Spectre a lot because of that aspect of it, though, that it's the idea of God is active, but it's only for those most heinous crimes, but they get the worst punishments.
So this is right here probably the best scene connected to the fallout from Identity Crisis. God bless Mark Waid for setting it up.
Absolutely. It's so good.
Because
let you go.
The ironic punishment that the Spectre wants Ralph to visit is on the woman who killed his own wife, Jean Loring. Jean Loring was the Adams ex-wife who went crazy and killed Sue Dibney using the Adams shrinking suit. And she was locked up. And then she became the new host for Eclipso, who is another kind of avatar of wrath. And she manipulated the Spectre during the whole Day of Vengeance Infinite Crisis storyline, wiped out most of the magic heroes, ushered in the 10th age of magic that this whole thing is subtextually about. So the Spectre's hey, I've got this horrible force of wrath and chaos active in the universe. And the only way I can really defeat her is by using my vengeance powers against her. And nobody is more equipped to do that than you, Ralph, because this is the woman who killed your wife. So if you can come up with a punishment that will torture her for everything she's done, then I can use that energy to bring your wife back. And that's what they do. They trap her in this kind of bucket of this little pocket of time. Ralph Dibney is empowered by the Spectre, more powerful than he's ever been, in order to wrestle in space with this Jean Loring Eclipso fusion.
Yeah, the art here is really lovely, honestly. Big space battle, right? But also it is a murder hobo with his eyes glowing white. Dibney has been through the ringer emotionally, and it's nice to see him get some kind of cathartic release in this sequence that's really physical. He's straight, he gets her in a chokehold, a naked rear choke, and is I'm gonna fuck you up.
Right.
And it's incredibly satisfying because even though personally, I think Jean Loring also suffered intense character assassination in Identity Crisis.
Oh, yeah.
There's no reason for her to have, gone crazy and decided to murder her friend. That's just like not signaled at all, and it's like a very bad writing. But if we have to accept that as the canon status quo of this universe, then I am extremely glad that Ralph got a chance to face his wife's murderer.
Exactly. Like the attitude that Mark Waid approaches the DC universe with, and to an extent, Grant Morrison as well, is the idea that we are additive here. We're not going to subtract or negate anything that happened before. We're going to build on it whether we like it or not, and we're going to explore that because the whole point of DC is writers and artists building on the work of writers and artists.
Yeah, even when they're deeply pissed about the things that happened in the past, they're like, this is the seed I'm like taking. This is the ball. I'm taking this ball and I have to run with it. I don't get a choice about what happened before me, but I have a choice in what stories I tell onward from here, which I really admire about this project too.
If we're pissed about it, let's explore it. And those are some of the best comics. That's what gave us Oracle after the just disastrous killing joke character assassination. Just sidelining Barbara Gordon just to give Batman a little bit of drama. John Ostrander and Kim Yale came around and was like, what if we use this to build one of the coolest characters in DC Comics?
Honestly, bringing back Jason Todd, like not a move I was supportive in when it happened, but then when it did happen, we got a lot of writers that were really interested in actually exploring the emotional state of the Robins, developing them even more into really, really interesting characters, because then they had their own legacy and their own, like, they could acknowledge the past more readily because there was like a person that represented it in front of them.
That's a very good point I hadn't considered. Every Robin got richer when Jason Todd came back.
Yeah, because they got something to fight for that wasn't Batman connected, right? Like they were like, no, we have to choose to like being Robin because here's this example of someone who was deeply harmed by being Robin, right? So you give your characters something new to chew on, something new to tackle.
We'll catch up with Ralph and Jean in a little bit. Now it's time for us to go to day 2, where we're checking in on Wave Rider, who is curled up in a ball in a clock factory. Do you know anything about Wave Rider, Gita?
I do not. I want to make a brief mention that part of the reason why I think this issue is so good is that it's my it's all 3 of my favorite plot lines. Like I'm realizing right now as we're talking about this, it's like when on Heroes, they would catch up with the hero in Tokyo and like being able to teleport everywhere. And I was like, oh, fucking yeah. And then they go immediately back to the cheerleader plotline. I'm like, oh, fucking yes. Instead of having to deal with the girl who has 2 personalities or the cop with powers, ? Like, this is just A plot for me. And I love this.
It really is.
I don't know anything about Wave Rider, but the fact that I look at these panels and I know immediately it's time travel stuff. I know exactly what plotline we're dealing with right now.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You don't need to know anything about Wave Rider. He's from a crossover an event comic nobody remembers. But the point is, these are all like time manipulating guys who are just being hunted by Skeets, just going around and absorbing them and making sure they can't mess with whatever nefarious plans it has. It's just like channeling chronal power from it. Like, hey, you ever wonder where I get my gold coating from? It's literally made out of Wave Rider's skin, which feels like such a Grant Morrison idea.
Yeah, that does feel like a Grant Morrison idea. I think you get to the final page of this confrontation between Wave Rider and Skeets, and it's gone into the 6-panel grid, and that feels like a Grant Morrison, not influenced sequence, especially ending on the classic Felix the Cat cat clock ticking. I also really like in the lead up to this. So the first page of it is essentially a 6-panel grid where Wave Rider is just sitting, hiding out, contemplating, and each panel it shows that 1 second has gone by.
Yeah, that's really nice.
I really like that. Like it really tells you how these characters experience time and also how weird it is to be a time-based hero in this universe.
Yeah, there's a tick and a tick and a tick, and then suddenly the ticks stop. And we're just stuck at 5:25:20. And Wave Rider looks up and goes, oh no.
Yeah. That's what we call comic books.
Yeah.
Motherfucker. Exactly.
I will say, I'm consulting my liner notes again. This is a Jeff Johns scene. But, you know, he must have picked something up from, like, it's all of these writers are jamming with each other. They're building on each other.
Like, it's why you really, like, you put different names on episodes of television, but every episode of television is a credit to the whole writer's room. Like, there's a reason why you have a room of those people around each other. You inspire each other. You plant ideas in each other's heads. You also inspire people to write in ways that are different from how they normally would.
Right. Like you said, that a lot of this Ralph Dibny story in this issue is about getting justice for Gotham Central. But Ralph Dibny is a Mark Waid story. So it's Mark Waid being like, let me do something for my buddy Greg here. Yeah.
And it's like, you know, Jeff Johns being like, how would Grant do this? Like,
exactly.
How would Grant demonstrate how weird this is? Right. You know, like, how would Grant show what a time-based hero, how they experience time? And it's like, well, you show each second passing and then the second stop passing. Yeah.
That takes us to day 5, the best scene in this issue. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's so fucking good. God, it's so good.
Yeah.
Like, every time I turned the page in this one, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Let's sickos, yes. Like me at the fucking window. God, I love it.
We go immediately from time standing still in the clock factory to time stand still in Nanda Parbat. God, this is so good.
Just so good. I'm sorry. Like, Renee's noir voiceover still slaps. This is one of the best monologues she gets in the entire series. The one that
100%
is here. Just incredible.
We just kind of get to live on this scene with her, training with Richard Dragon, Tot Roeder doing research, trying to figure out what the hell Intergang's up to. Just, it's part training montage, part just like adjusting to a new kind of life with Vic and his closest friends. And she's clearly being led to something. And it's in this moment she figures it all out. Mm-hmm. While Tot's piecing the crime Bible they stole together. And Richard's teaching her how to throw people. She's like, and what does my friend Charlie do? Charlie coughs.
Yeah. Gut punch. Just an absolute gut punch. I remember reading that and still, like, as it was coming out. And then just still not really believing it. Like having the same emotional experience as Renee does here. This sequence here, it's an 8-panel grid, a little bit less room for the faces, but also more room for these two characters to talk. Mm-hmm. Where the first thing she says to him before the page turns over is, "When'd you quit?" And then he replies, "Not soon enough."
Not soon enough.
The next panel is just a wordless panel of her throwing down a pack of cigarettes. Yeah. Like crumpling it up and throwing it away.
And you just immediately start thinking of every time Vic has been on Renee's ass for smoking this entire series.
Yeah. She didn't even like him when they met. But here she leaves this conversation emotionally devastated. Yeah. Because it's just not what she wants to hear. She's had so many she's been in such a rough spot for so long, and Vic has really been guiding and helping her when she has completely given up on herself.
I cannot believe I allowed myself to make another friend, and now he's dying too.
Yeah. This is the stuff that great dramas are made of. Yeah. Right? Like, this is the ironic punishment issue.
It really is.
It's like, this is why the Spectre's here. Everyone's getting their just desserts today.
And Renee is taking it personally. She is internalizing Vic's trauma and making it her own. She goes, "Why me, Charlie? 8 billion people. Why me?" And Vic says, "That's the question, isn't it?" Now, fun little note here in this very dramatic scene. How many people were on Earth in 2007 when this comic came out?
I don't know.
It was like 6.7 billion. It was significantly less than this. But but Mark Waid wanted to adjust it specifically because there are so many fictional countries on Earth that there had to be a bigger population on the DC Earth than our own.
The DC planet Earth is just slightly larger than our planet Earth.
That's canon, actually. In Kurt Busiek's JLA Avengers that came out in 2003, 2004, a bunch of Marvel heroes come over to Earth. Like, why is it bigger than ours?
That's really funny, though. That's the only way you get 3 different New York-sized metropolitan cities on the East Coast.
That's how you get Kahndaq. That's how you get Bialya. That's how you get, all those other fictional countries.
It's the only way to make it make sense. The only way. I like that. I like that little factoid. I think it's very dumb, which is why I like it.
Yeah, I like it a lot, too. Tot cracks the mystery. There's a prophecy in the crime Bible referring to the twice named daughter of Cain, and deciphering a bunch of clues. Renee realizes that what the religion of crime really wants is to kidnap her ex-girlfriend, Kate Kane, as some kind of ritual sacrifice. And they got to go back to Gotham City.
So before we turn the page and get back to the main sort of thrust of the plot here in this issue, I also want to make a notice of the color story that's coming through in the coloring for each of these sequences. Please. Yeah, so in the first sequence, we have like neon greens. Everything is offset by the ethereal glow of the stars in space. In fact, everything is kind of glowing, including Ralph's eyes. There is just a real cosmic tone. And then you go forward into these rich golden tones of everything dealing with Skeets and time, where the time force itself has this golden, warm, rich glow. And then you immediately from there go to the Nanda Parbat story, and it starts off chilly, cold, really everything is blue. And then as time goes on, the palette mutes even more into literally film noir sepia tones. And then from there you turn the page, and it's still those sepia tones, but the background of the page that all the panels are placed on top of, it's red now.
Yeah, the colorist on this issue is Pete Pantazis, who does some really incredible work. He would later go on to work on Final Crisis with Grant Morrison.
Final Crisis looked amazing. Say what you will about the content, it looked incredible.
Absolutely,
every page.
yes.
Yeah.
And that takes us to the one thing that they promised Dan DiDio they'd never do, fucking with the timeline, which is we go from day 5 to week -84, day -2, all the way back to this is a specific scene in Identity Crisis that you can like a really fun thing about this issue is that if you go through Identity Crisis, there's a tiny continuity error where Sue Dibney hears a noise coming from downstairs and it's literally never explained. And this scene is like, well, this is the noise. Yeah,
I noticed in the collected volume, Mark Waid talks about how proud he was for clearing up that that little continuity issue. And it's like, you were looking for any excuse to say, well, we didn't fuck with the timeline, did we?
Right.
We actually corrected the timeline, didn't we, Dan?
That's some shit-eating grin coming through the prose there.
Absolutely.
Oh, man.
But here again, it's he takes Jean Loring back to the scene of her crime, literally her crime. They are portrayed in grayscale against the muted colors of the real apartment, or the real house that Ralph and Sue used to live in. And not only does Ralph force her to witness this, he takes away the thing that she claimed was the reason why she committed this murder. He takes away whatever it is in her brain that is causing her to have like a psychiatric delusion.
Yeah.
That tells her that this is the right course of action. So she no longer, she doesn't even really know where she is. At first she doesn't understand what's happening. And then she becomes all too aware that she's about to watch herself kill one of her best friends.
This 2-panel sequence is haunting to me.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is such an unlikely, impossible scenario. And yet you feel just how awful it would be to have to watch that.
It's some absolute Black Mirror shit. It is like, I think Ralph comes to the same realization in this moment that we do. And just like kind of what you can call a general statement about how we punish people in general. That like when you relieve someone of the conditions in which they committed their crime, they are not that person anymore. You are punishing a completely different person.
Yeah. In fact, the moment where he is overcome by grief himself is when Jean offers him mercy that he wouldn't offer her. She says, Ralph, look away. You're only punishing yourself.
And Ralph can't do it.
Yeah.
He decides this is too cruel, and he wimps out, and the Spectre basically calls him a pussy.
Yeah, basically. See, this is why I like that it's Crispmus Allen, because like Crispmus was the only good cop, right?
Yeah.
He was the only one on an incredibly corrupt police force that he knew was corrupt that was willing to see justice done. And here he is given the chance to do justice, like real justice, without any of the rules of society. And yet he knows that people will find it too cruel.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting place to put like the only good cop into, where it's like, are you so wounded by your life as a human that you are not actually fit to serve as this character? That would have been a really interesting thing to explore had anyone explored it at all.
Yeah. And as unlikely as it is, Ralph walks away from this utter failure with newly found confidence. Because as I often say with my friends when we're playing a video game and we figure out how to do a thing, but our reflexes aren't there yet, the premise is sound. Basically, if Sue, we have just proven that it's possible to bring Sue back to life. Maybe the Spectre can't do it, but surely there must be another way then, because if that is it within the realm of mystic possibility, then no one is ever really gone forever if you find a way around it. So we just got to find another solution.
Yeah, it is. And then he leaves us with this incredibly Star Wars-esque panel that I really, really love. And he says to the Spectre, "Take me to Nanda Parbat." We love it. Everybody, folks, we love it. Folks, we love knowing that all our favorite characters are going to meet. We love that shit.
And and then we get a preview of Next in 52 with 3 of our most neglected storylines. We're going back to Batwoman. We're going back to whatever the fuck Red Tornado is up to in Australia. We're going back to the head of Ekron. Basically, I hope you enjoyed this week because it's all B-plot next time.
Yeah, they have to get back to the stories and heroes about the deadbeat mom with 2 personalities.
Yeah.
They just have to tell that story for whatever reason.
That brings us to our backup, the origin of Black Canary. This week's guest artist is the legendary Howard Chaykin, the guy who did American Flag. I don't like his art style. I'll just say that. I'm sorry. I know he's like very respected in comics, but I don't know. Everything he does comes out as like kind of sexist. I don't love it. I guess the idea was that Black Canary is a very pin-up good girl art style hero. So they're like, let's get Howard Chaykin for it. But I don't know about this. What did you think about this?
I think the way he draws the costume is cool.
Yeah.
I also really love this iteration of her costume with the flat boots with the yellow, strap things in front. I'm not a huge fan of his art either. I do understand why he is so respected, and he certainly has an incredibly unique style.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I love the one illustration of Dina's mom as the original Black Canary, where that does seem to fit more naturally with his style. I think it is, I agree. I understand why this artist was chosen for this one, but, you know, we would have loved a Babs Tar if we're going for cheesecake, you know?
For sure.
We would have loved one of those.
I would have taken a Greg Land, honestly.
Yeah, Land is always tracing from porn, but this is maybe the one scenario in which it works.
Look, he was one of the landmark artists on Birds of Prey. That's the right time to deploy.
I mean, that's 100% fair. That was one of that was the reason why he had all those people who were willing to defend him for tracing from porn for so long.
Greg Land knows how to draw. He is a great artist. The tragedy of Greg Land is that when you look at his early work, it's so good. And then he was
that is the tragedy.
I don't have enough time to keep doing this art and make my deadlines. I need to start tracing.
The difference between Birds of Prey and then going to, I think it was Ultimate Fantastic Four, which is where he drew, that was when it became very clear that he was often tracing female expressions from pornography.
Right.
That is like one of the top 10 anime portrayals of history.
100%,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like everyone was so excited, and the art was really good for a long time, but then he just had too much fucking work.
We were all rooting for you, .gif.
Yes, that's Tyra Banks is there screaming at him. Like screaming at him, trace from me instead.
I will say, to Mark Waid's credit, this is a really, really good summation of a very confusing character.
Yes.
Just the way it starts. Not many superhero careers are motivated by a need to annoy your mom. Like, that is all you need for the key to modern Black Canary at that point. And what I really, really love about this is that in the entire story, not once does Green Arrow ever show up.
I do like that too.
She's
her own person,
This is all about defining Dinah on her own terms, which is something Tom King is doing now, which, your feelings on Tom King may vary.
Yeah.
But
I think he writes women well and like understands the family, which is something that is important to Dinah specifically as a character. Even more so than a lot of DC characters, Black Canary is about legacy.
Sure.
Legacy in the past, legacy going forward.
That's really coming through right now in Birds of Prey. I think Birds of Prey right now is maybe better than it's ever been, and it's got Black Canary at the front and center.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Good for her.
This is a really nice summation of her whole deal. The essential storylines are basically read Birds of Prey. And I'm like, yeah, that's really what you gotta do.
Yeah, that's it. Those are the essential ones.
Don't even bother with Green Arrow.
It's her romance with Ollie is cool, but it is so Ollie-centric. Yeah. Like, it is so, like, about Ollie becoming a better man. Whereas Dinah doesn't have anything to prove.
This is why I was always, like, pairing Superman with Wonder Woman in the New 52 was it just so blatantly came across as a publicity stunt. Like, these characters do not work together. You're just trying to get headlines.
Wonder Woman, what would she do with him? He's from Kansas. He wants to eat apple pie. He wants to introduce, he needs Lois. He needs Lois so bad.
There actually was a really good John Byrne story in the 80s where Wonder Woman's publicist sets her up on a date with Superman. And they go out once and they're like, I think we could be really good friends, but romantically, this is not going to work.
No, they are really, truly platonic best friends.
For sure.
They just don't have romantic chemistry to me. I am like, if she was gonna sleep with a man, it wouldn't be Clark.
Right.
It just wouldn't be.
Like, the only time a superhero couple really works is when those heroes were created for each other to begin with. Like Big Barda and Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're diluting one character to be supporting in the other character's story.
Which is the big problem with Ollie stories that try to incorporate Dinah too much. She is an interesting character in her own right. I would love to read a book about them together, but you also know that book would mostly be about Ollie.
Yeah.
She needs to have her own opportunities to shine.
I think what's really interesting right now is that you have a Birds of Prey ongoing and you have a Green Arrow ongoing. And it's striking an interesting balance where Ollie is very much a supporting character to Dinah in Birds of Prey. And Dinah is a supporting character to Ollie in Green Arrow. And that's not something you usually get the space for.
Right? Like, I think that's very interesting, too.
Yeah.
Like, there's a continuity of their relationship between the books they appear in. But for too long, Dinah was just like a backup character to Ollie. And that was really frustrating, especially after the sort of golden period of Birds of Prey ended. And she didn't really have a book where she was making a lot of appearances on her own. All right.
What was your favorite scene this issue? You got a lot to choose from.
I honestly think it's the skeet scene because it's so scary. It is so scary. I really appreciate the craft in that. I know that I think the other scenes that you've mentioned as to being your favorite scene already is like more meaningful, maybe better written, but I just have a soft spot for time travel bullshit. And I think they pull it off the really confusing nature of time travel in the DC universe very well here. And they convincingly make the little robot skeets really, really terrifying.
I mean, every time I read 52, this when did you quit talk stands out to me. It's like one of the moments that really hooked me into Vic Sage, the guy, as opposed to the Question, the cartoon character. Because, I got into my favorite guy through Justice League Unlimited, and it's scenes like this that really humanize him. We're going to talk about it more in the weeks to come. But this whole decline of the last weeks of Vic Sage is very much inspired by our series breakdown artist Keith Giffen's relationship with his father and his father-in-law. And he told Greg Rucka while working on this, I've lost people to cancer two ways. I've seen it go fast and I've seen it go hard. and we're just really going to go into it. And like, it feels so real because it's coming from a place of like watching this person you love deteriorating before you. With all that said, on this read through, I was fucking haunted by the Jean Loring scene where he forces.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, I know.
I think the older I get, the more scary that is.
Yeah.
Especially because it's like it's an impossible scenario. This is a form of justice that most people long for, but will never see. And to do that and then to acknowledge at the same time that you are being too cruel it's like a knife in the, a knife in the heart. It hurts.
I think what makes it hurt more as I get older is the realization that this is an adult woman breaking down like this. This is not someone who like saw something scary and could turn it off. It's like, oh my God, my entire life is unraveling before me and I have to behold this horror.
You know, I've had moments where I've thought to myself, this is the worst moment of my life. I never want to experience this again. The very idea of going back to that time and watching it happen.
Literally?
No, thank you. I don't want to fucking do that.
It's very much a figurative manifestation of what Ralph's been doing to himself this entire series. He will not let himself leave the moment of his wife's death. Yeah. And when Jean pleads with him to look away, she's telling him to move on, which he hasn't. He's still looking for her, but we're seeing something. He is one of the world's greatest detectives. It might not take him too much longer to put it together. But there is a journey happening here in what is frequently considered by many wrong-thinking people the worst storyline in 52.
I can't believe people are so fucking wrong. I'm sorry. Like, it's not by a long shot the worst one in 52.
I mean, what I understand is that the fact that it acknowledges identity crisis happened at all disgusts them. But the interesting thing is how it deals with it.
Yes, like the thing that makes it interesting is that I think we all know history has shown Identity Crisis was a bad book and it sucked. And it was not good at all. And the changes it brought into the universe weren't good. So to see writers who are good take that material and craft something new and better from it. This is what American comics, do best.
But Gita, what about that one scene where Deathstroke fights the entire Justice League? He's such a cool badass.
I'm sorry.
Why doesn't he fight Batman now?
I don't understand why someone just didn't. Dina should have kicked him in the throat one time. He's just a regular guy. This
is a guy who gets his ass beaten by Robin regularly. Get over yourself.
He's regularly beaten up by 16-year-olds. Just fuck off.
I was arguing with my friend Wade the other day. I'm going to put Wade on blast, talking about how DC needs to do more to make Deathstroke feel like the biggest, like Deathstroke's the deadliest mercenary in the DC universe. Like, Wade, can you name one person Deathstroke has ever successfally killed?
He can't even kill his own kid. Like,
he was like, I don't know, man.
He can't kill Robin.
Yeah.
He can't kill a guy named Dick. Like, fuck off.
The Joker killed a Robin. Why can't you?
Yeah, the Joker has severe mental health problems and he killed a Robin, okay?
All right. Is there anything you want to put on the blackboard this week?
Okay, first I genuinely have, if this does not have an actual canonical answer, but they mention, I think it does, so I have to ask you first.
Sure.
They mentioned early on that the process for Jean murdering Sue is she put on the suit, the Atom suit.
Yeah.
Climbed into the telephone and then climbed out of the telephone in Sue's house and killed her there.
Yes.
How did she walk the whole way?
The way the Atom works is that when you shrink down to a certain size, the electric current in the telephone line can carry you at the speed of light from one telephone to another telephone. That's how the Atom has worked since the 1960s.
Okay, I suspected that was true.
Yeah.
I'm still going to throw it up on the blackboard.
Yeah.
Because I would like some more details on how that occurs.
I will tell you that the Atom doesn't do that trick anymore since the advent of cell phones.
Yeah, that would make no sense at all. You just like flying. Yippee! Sorry, I'm just imagining that working. But I guess they were lucky that Identity Crisis was written at a time when people, generally speaking, still had landlines.
Exactly.
Because no, obviously not. That would not happen now. Although it would be very funny to watch the Atom travel at the speed of a tweet, you know?
What I want to throw on the Blackboard, is a little sideways related to 52 in general. It's been a little while since we recorded episode 26. We took that halfway break. We let ourselves rest on the back catalog for a little while we caught up. What I have been doing in the interim is I have, for the first time, been listening to the audio drama adaptation by Graphic Audio, a movie in your mind, which you can't get anymore, of 52, written by Greg Cox. It's really interesting. And kind of the main thing about it is that the Ralph storyline is not in there. The Steel storyline is not in there. To make it like a reasonable book that you could listen to, they just focus on the Question, Booster Gold, and Black Adam. We don't see any of the space heroes. There's only a tiny bit of Oolong Island. We don't really get into Will Magnus of it all. Only the part that becomes relevant to the other storylines is really factored in. And by trimming it down, we get a lot more focus on stuff that happens behind the scenes and off camera in these specific storylines. We get a lot more of Renee. We get a lot more of Booster. We get a lot more of Black Adam. And it's very interesting how Greg approaches this. And there are certain things that he does that, like, 52 is a story that, like, yes, they plotted it out, but a lot of it is built on improv, where everyone's just kind of like figuring it out as they go. And kind of the benefit of these novelizations, like what we saw with Greg Rucka's excellent novelization of Batman No Man's Land, is that you can look at this story, see what worked and see what didn't, and go like, oh, that's what they should have done. And it ties up like the ending in a way that is actually a lot more satisfying than the way the comics do it. Like, it makes Booster Gold instrumental in defeating Black Adam in a way that's like, oh, why didn't they do that in the comics? It makes so much sense. A second
draft in a lot of senses.
I think it's worth getting into if you can find it. Unfortunately, you can't really find it anywhere now because that's the internet we live in. Them's the breaks. But if you go poking around, maybe you'll be able to find it somewhere. I can't legally say.
No, we are not here to encourage piracy, but we do know it exists.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to say right now.
Yeah, all I'll say is we are on the cruise.
I gotta start watching One Piece again.
You really do.
Good.
Oh my God, I'm loving One Piece right now.
What if I made David watch it?
Oh God,
my beautiful, incredible husband, David Grossman, of course.
David would love it because David has a heart, and anyone who has a heart will love One Piece.
That is true. He's been loving the new Ranma 1/2 adaptation, which is really, really good. Also, if you haven't seen that, it fucking slaps.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's time to ask the questions. That's us. We're the questions. I don't have cancer, but we're going to do it anyway. Our first question is from Brandon F. And if you want to join Brandon F. in sending in your questions, you could do that by writing into 52mailbag@gmail.com.
We love it.
We love it. Brandon F. asks, are there any characters or books you had to come back to years later to finally get or appreciate?
So many.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Like, it's just one. I mean, the first time I read Watchmen, didn't really get it. I skipped all of the interstitial, like, text portions.
Yeah. Skip the Black Freighter shit.
Yeah. I read it several times since then. It's a totally different book every single time. Like,
I get something new out of Watchmen every time I read it.
I really do. It is, I hate saying it in this way, but it is literature. Like, it just is. It is literature in a way that people don't really write comics.
Same is true for V for Vendetta. Same is true for From Hell.
From Hell is a masterclass of comic books.
Jesus Christ, From Hell.
It's just really fucking good.
Yeah.
And Alan Moore is one of the goats, and From Hell is even better than you have heard it is.
I wouldn't even say one of. He is just the best who has ever done it.
You know, there are some people who just totally dominate an art form and, like, nobody can reach those high highs. Part of it is, like, just the material conditions of the world. Like, it is much... Alan Moore started writing American comics at a time when that was a very easy profession for British people to get into.
Yeah.
And now it's like a completely different landscape. But also it's just that Alan Moore is better at thinking in this way than a lot of other people are in the world.
Alan Moore going from comics into prose literature is like Shohei Ohtani going from Japanese baseball to American baseball. He had already done everything there.
Yeah, exactly. There was no other height for him to reach.
Yeah.
You know, I'll say that also I felt the same way about the Return of the Dark Knight, the Frank Miller. Miller, for all of his numerous problems, an incredibly complicated man, and a guy that has said things that piss me off frequently. But that Batman comic's fucking great. His Batman Year One also fucking great. Like it took a long time getting over my discomfort with a lot of the things that he believes politically. Yeah. He is, like Cormac McCarthy, one of the rare conservative guys that's actually a very good artist.
Yeah.
But he is that good. Like, just believe it.
Ah, man. Frank Miller. Complicated guy.
It's, I read that very recent profile of him where he talked about how he recovered from alcoholism very, very late in his life and really turned things around. I don't think that explains, say, Holy Terror Batman.
Yeah.
But it definitely does. It is a very interesting look at someone who, again, was a master of the form that they worked in, lost the spark, and their attempts to put their life back together.
I would recommend Frank Miller's last Dark Knight comic he wrote, The Golden Child, which has art by Raphael Grampa. And it just does some really, really cool shit. The same way that Dark Knight Returns is him raging about Reagan. That comic is him raging about Trump.
Interesting. Because he's become out as a really anti-Trump guy.
Yeah.
Even though he was very much into the war on terror.
He's very pro-Bush. I don't know, losing the world, experiencing a terrorism attack changed him, I guess.
Yeah. I think also, like, post-alcoholism, his political beliefs have changed slightly. Not a lot, but slightly.
I would love to hear a conversation between Frank Miller and Tom King, honestly.
I really would, too. I think I'm so fascinated by Tom King's personal history. I think maybe writing comics about it is not enough.
No. I think he's got to work it out elsewhere.
I think he's got a lot of stuff to work out, and he should do so more. Do it more, please.
One last thing I will say on this topic is 52 itself.
Yeah.
52 was the first comic that I really got to know who the Question was in comic book form. And going back and reading the Denny O'Neil stuff, going back and reading the Greg Rucka stuff on Gotham Central, made me appreciate 52 all the more on the revisit, that this is like truly written as a sequel to those comics.
Yeah.
And it can easily be read without reading those, but it's made so much richer for having experienced those stories.
And I will say the Question himself is a character that I didn't really fuck with the first time around. I was into the Question storyline because I loved Renee, right?
Sure.
Like, Renee was an incredibly cool character to me. And she was who I latched onto from Gotham Central. But I did not really understand Vic Sage until I learned a lot more about comic books, right? Yeah. Vic Sage is a key that unlocks the entire history of comics to me, from their origin to now.
Jeff B. asks a very similar question. Do you have books that you return to where you're afraid they might not be as good as you remember, only to be proven wrong? Like, oh yeah, this absolutely does hold up. Dark Knight Returns is one of them. Dark Knight Returns is honestly pretty good. I love Batman Year One, but I think that has a lot more to do with Dave Mazzucchelli's clean art than it does with Frank Miller himself. I think Dave did a lot to rein him in and doesn't get enough flowers on that. Asterius Polyp, also one of the all-time great comics.
I want to hear something that as a Grant Morrison hater, I know you'll appreciate.
Okay.
Every time I reread any Grant Morrison comic, I have this intense fear that it might suck.
Wait, is this bullshit?
Yeah, like every time I pick it up, I'm just like, are they actually as good as I remember? And then I read it, I'm like relieved.
Okay.
I think especially Seven Soldiers, which is like now becoming a bit more obscure. That's one where I know the ending is kind of a huge mess and like they just ran out of time to make it good. But I reread the individual issues in there and I'm just like, yeah, this is a person who like eats, sleeps, breathes, thinks comic books all times. And they understand the story they're trying to tell. I really love it. It's really good. New X-Men is another one for me, like where Grant Morrison, I know that like the Morrison's take on Magneto is like not my favorite in the world. Also, again, something that's influenced by 9/11 happening. It was like I remember Morrison like sitting down in an interview and being like, listen, I know everyone I understand the new take on Magneto as being like is very popular, but he's also a mad old terrorist twat. I was like, not wrong exactly, but not the betrayal that people want to see from you. But I reread that and I'm just like, well, everything you did with the understanding of how like subcultures live and die and how like what the conditions, material conditions are for people who are marginalized in this book is really, really incredible.
Yeah.
They are that good. And it's a little annoying because then you have to be like, I know when you recommend it to people, you have to be like, listen, I know you're going to be skeptical when you look at this, but it is that good. And I've tried several times to make myself hate it and that hasn't happened yet.
Is this the episode where I cry about Neil Gaiman, or are we going to save that for later?
Let's save that for later because I can't handle that shit right now.
I cannot handle that shit. I'm going through too much, honestly.
Yeah, no, too many events happen. We'll do a special episode where we like deconstruct our grief about learning someone who is such an incredible part of this art form is such a horrible person. But it does suck shit.
Yeah.
That's it.
I just wanted to acknowledge it. It's been a while since we've said anything about him since all this came out. I just wanted to, we know about it and we're still figuring out how to address it because I feel like an eighth of my brain has been deleted. It kind of sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just sort of like I have to stop myself from thinking about it because then I'll start thinking about it forever.
Yeah. I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while and plug another thing I'm working on.
Oh, hooray. I can't wait.
I have another podcast I do. It's about video games. It's called Insert Credit. It's a podcast that's been going on consistently since 2020, inconsistently since 2012, based on a video game website that's been putting out stuff since 2001. I do it with Brandon Sheffield, the founder of Necrosoft. I do it with Frank Cifaldi, the founder of the Video Game History Foundation. And we just added a new third chair, The Verge's Ash Parrish, who is just a delight to have on. We've had her on as a guest multiple times. And when it came time to bring a new person onto the show, it was absolutely a no-brainer who we were going to enlist. And I'm very excited to welcome this new era of Insert Credit in. And if you're listening to this and you want to hear more of me asking earnest questions about video games and getting the wildest answers possible, check out Insert Credit. Start with episode 363. That's what I'm calling the start of season 6. It's a good time.
It's a good podcast.
Yeah, it's a very good podcast. Gita's been on it.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun on that podcast.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Aftermath.site.
Yeah.
The key to my livelihood. Sincerely, we are 100% reader supported and worker owned. This is the start of a cohort of a new wave of independent journalism. We are joined by other sites like 404 and Defector that are, and Hearing Things, which is a new music blog from Julianne Escobedo-Shepherd and other former Pitchfork writers. I could not be happier about our little company. We have just had our first anniversary. And sincerely, if you like this podcast, please do subscribe to the site. It rocks. Our community rocks. I fucking love it.
Mm-hmm. I want to say it's been a little while since we got a review of our podcast on Apple Podcasts. So it really helps out the show's visibility, helps people discover it if you do that. So go ahead and do that. It takes a couple minutes and I really appreciate it. I read all of them.
I also read all of them and they make me very happy. If you want to make me personally happy or Alex Jaffe personally happy, write a review.
Or both.
And if you don't write a review, just do me a favor. Tell a friend about this podcast.
Yeah.
Tweet about it. Post about it somewhere. I would love to see people talking about what we talk about. The Discord that you can join if you are a $10 subscriber to Aftermath.site does often have robust conversation about comic books in general and this podcast in specific.
Yeah.
But I think we do a good job. So I want more people to know about it.
Yeah. And I'm usually around if you have any questions about comics. I'm there in the Discord and I can answer them, especially about DC stuff, because that's kind of my area of expertise. So I know it can be really difficult and intimidating to get into this whole thing. Don't even worry about it. I'm going to be your guy.
Literally don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Jaffe's here.
I'm your guy.
If you ask Jaffe a question about comic books at any time of day, he will send you a detailed answer.
I'll wake up at 3:37 a.m. and tell you about what actually happened in Armageddon 2001.
Which I literally don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it for this week. There's just one more bit of business, and that's for me to ask you, are you ready?
Can you get back to me like 10 minutes?
I think we've done that one already.
Give me another 15.
Okay.
I'm really sleepy.
I'm so sleepy.
I'm so sleepy. I don't want to talk about it. 52 Pickup is an Aftermath production created by Gita Jackson and Alex Jaffe and edited by Esper Quim with original music by John Ahrens. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the show's personalities and do not reflect those of DC Entertainment or Warner Brothers. Please rate and review our show wherever you can and send your questions and comments to 52mailbag@gmail.com. Never stop reading comics.